Leaving a job is a big decision, but so is staying in the wrong one. If you've been thinking, I don't know how much longer I can do this, you're not alone. If you're stuck in that in between space, unsure of what to do next, this episode will help you sort through the noise and find some clarity. Welcome to Control Your Career. I'm Julia Toothacre, your strategic career consultant, and I am so glad that you're here. This podcast is all about helping ambitious professionals take control of their career with clarity and confidence. This season, we're walking through some of the most common and frustrating career challenges professionals face. Things like stalled growth, burnout, manager issues, career transitions, and more. And we're working through them using my Control Your Career process, which is also the foundation for the book that I am writing right now. So if you're enjoying these conversations, just know that more is coming. Last week, we talked about what it means to feel stuck in your career and how to start figuring out what is actually going on beneath the surface. If you missed that episode, I highly recommend going back. It lays some of the groundwork for everything that we're going to be talking about in this season. Today, though, we are digging into one of the most common questions that I hear, especially in this economy. How do I know when it's time to leave my job? This is rarely a black and white decision. Maybe you're unhappy, but you can't quite explain why. Maybe you've been loyal to your team or to that paycheck. I know how much we love that. But deep down, you know that it's just not working anymore. Or honestly, maybe you're doing fine, but you're not growing and you're starting to feel that. And it might even be showing up in the work that you're doing. So in this episode, we're going to walk through some of the most common reasons that people start thinking about leaving their job. And then I'm going to show you how to apply the Control Your Career process to figure out what is going to be right for you. So let's get into it. First, let's talk about why this decision is so hard. This is something that is very common. This is a mental and emotional weight of a decision that people go through. So if you are feeling this and you're like, gosh, I haven't felt this before, what is going on? Again, very, very common. And so why do we feel this way? Why is this decision so hard? Well, first of all, we've invested a lot into our career, into maybe this position or an organization, especially if you've been there for a while. And leaving can feel like starting over, which is a really big transition. This decision can also be hard because you don't know if it's you or if it's the job. Sometimes things happen, right? We get burnt out and we change, right? Or leadership changes, or there's a merger, like something's going on. And so a lot of times we have to figure out what is at the heart of that. I know there's something called the golden handcuffs. I know for some of my more senior listeners, you're going to understand that, my more experienced listeners. This is basically when you are tied to a position because of the benefits. So the title is good, the salary is good, the benefits are good, you have the flexibility that you want, and you feel tied to this position, but you know that something's missing. That is always something that is so hard for, especially my more senior clients, to try to work through in their career. A lot of times, too, the risk feels bigger than the reward. And so we don't know what we're walking into if we switch positions. And so that can feel really scary. It's a really big risk and a really big transition. And so I know a lot of times when I work with clients, we try to figure out, can we manage in the position before we jump ship? But that is something that you have to work through, are the risk factors with that. This is a big one too. You don't want to disappoint anybody, right? And so again, this decision is hard because we feel like we're letting people down. And that could be ourselves. It could be a significant other. It could be coworkers. It could be a leader. Could be clients. I mean, there are so many people that you might feel like you're going to disappoint, and you have to work through some of those feelings. And, one of the things that I always say at the end of the day is you don't owe anybody anything. And so even though you have clients you like and coworkers you like and leaders and people you might like at the organization, at the end of the day, you don't owe them anything. And for some of you, you might just be tired. You might just be tired. And the idea of thinking about change is really, really overwhelming. It's mentally and emotionally exhausting. You might know that you need a change, but the decision making around that becomes very weighted because of everything that we have to think about. So I just want to normalize this for everybody because I know that this is a conversation that people are going to have some feelings about, and you might not quite know what's going on. So these are definitely some of the reasons of why this decision is so hard. So now let's look at the top reasons that you might want to leave. Okay. So these are kind of the common themes that I see as the reason that people want to leave their position. And just to be transparent, some of this aligns with why the decision is so hard. So we have the decision-making process, and then we have kind of what we are actually feeling. So we're going to talk about those reasons now. So first, you've outgrown the role. I find that this is one of the most common things that I hear, especially from my more experienced clients. So they have mastered the job. There's really nowhere to go. So they don't see a path forward. You might be bored, or you feel like there's just no challenge. Now, some of you don't want a challenge, and that's fine. But for my clients, most of them tend to be fairly high achieving. And so if there is not a problem to solve and if there isn't a challenge that they can work through, then they become bored and we have to start looking for something else. But you really look at the landscape and you understand that there really isn't anywhere for you to go. So there's no opportunity for promotion. There are no stretch projects, and there really isn't any development available to you. And sometimes when you've outgrown a role, you just want different work. Sometimes our roles can become repetitive in certain industries and certain functions. And some people love that, don't get me wrong, but some people don't. And so if you want that variety, then again, you might have outgrown the role and we have to start looking for something else. Something that I find that's been more common, especially with some of the younger generations, is the culture or leadership is misaligned. And so what this means is that the leadership lacks vision and sometimes communication, sometimes both. And so this can happen either when you get into a position and you realize it's not a good fit, or the organization has changed over time and now it just doesn't work for you. And so maybe new leadership has come in and you don't like where they're headed, right? Or the communication has not been great about different things that are going on in the organization. So there's a misalignment there. Some of my clients, their values have been compromised. And so again, a lot of times this is something where an organization is growing and shifting, and then that changes. Most of my clients, they're doing the work to get into the organization. They understand the values at that point. But sometimes the spoken values and the lived values of an organization are very different. And so you might realize that when you first get into a position, but sometimes it might take time to understand that it has shifted. One thing that I think happens more often than not when we're talking about culture and leadership is you don't feel safe. You don't feel safe with the manager. You don't feel safe with the team. So there's a misalignment there. And that can be for a lot of reasons I'm not going to necessarily dig into for this episode, but that is definitely something that you want to think about. And then also alongside that, there's toxic or passive aggressive work environment. And so this is where you've been in a situation for a while and you know it's not right. You know that something is going on. You're not treated right. You're witnessing other people not treated right. So we have that misalignment of culture. Obviously, when it's a toxic situation, we want to get out of that as quickly as we can. Make sure that you are documenting. That's a really niche situation to deal with, but it is one of the main um, reasons that we see people leave. And then the job is taking too much of a toll. So I've actually had a few clients that have gone through this recently. And this is, I think, one of the hardest things to come to terms with. And so when we're talking about the job like taking a toll on us, it means that we are living in constant anxiety, constant stress, and we've gotten to the place of burnout, or a new term that I'm hearing now is quiet cracking. So, you're doing the job, you're showing up, but internally you are ready to combust. Some signs of that too is our physical and our mental health is suffering. You feel off even when you're outside of work. So your work is draining you so much that you cannot function when you are outside of work. And that might even be hindering some of your relationships in your life. And then the emotional labor and the emotional toll outweighs any kind of reward that the career is going to provide. So when we are talking about a job taking too much of a toll, a lot of times this is a progression, and a lot of people don't want to admit that this is actually the issue. And especially if you have perfectionist tendencies or if you happen to be a very high achiever, admitting to yourself that the environment and the job is too much is very hard to come to terms with. One thing I will say, I had a client recently who went through this and made the decision to leave. And oh my goodness, they are so much happier. And I was surprised because I did not think that this was actually the best option for them. I was trying to sway them a different way. They ended up leaving and they are a completely different person now, and they're a better version of themselves. So if that is something that's going on, I highly recommend you work with a coach. Or even if you're in therapy, work with your therapist about it if they're comfortable having those conversations, because this is something that I think you really have to think through the implications of leaving a position because it's too much. And then you're just staying for the wrong reasons. I kind of mentioned this. I mentioned this before, but you're afraid of starting over. That's so common. Anytime we make a big transition, that can be really scary. You feel loyal. That's something that I know for especially some of our older generations, they really latch onto. They feel loyalty to a team, to a manager, to a leader, or just to the organization because they've been there so long, or they believe in the mission of the organization and they don't want to leave. The problem is if the position or the team or the leader, if it's no longer serving you, then you don't want to stay, right? You're staying for the wrong reasons. Also, I hear too, you've invested too much time to walk away. So you've put so much of yourself into an organization. So maybe you've built something out in the organization, or you own certain projects, or you're the point person for a certain client. So you feel like you can't stay. I hate to break it to you, but that organization is going to move on. As soon as you choose to leave, they're going to find somebody to come in and take that position. And you know what? If that client relationship falls apart, that's not on you. That's on the organization for putting too much responsibility and pressure onto you in the first place. Okay, so that was 4 of the top reasons that I hear people talking about why they want to leave and kind of figuring out if it's time to leave. Now let's move on to applying this issue into the Control Your Career framework. So just as a reminder, we have 5 stages that we are going to work through. The first is realistic reality. Then we have identity analysis. Purpose-driven plan is stage 3. Initiate action is stage 4. And rounding us out with stage 5 is high impact habits. Okay, so let's get going with realistic reality. So we've gone through some of this in the conversations that we just had around why this decision is so hard, and then also some of the reasons that you want to leave. So some of that we went through is going to be at the core of realistic reality, which is basically what is actually happening? What is prompting this? And so remember, when we're talking about realistic reality, this is what is actually happening. What's really important here, we talked about toxic environments, management, all of that. What's really important in realistic reality is that we get to the heart of whatever the issue is. And the worst thing that you can do is decide to leave a position, get to a new position to only deal with the same issues, right? And so I want to make sure that if you are going to leave a position, you are ready. You know why, you've done the work. If you need to do some work in your current position, you're doing that work before you make a transition. And I think this is also one of the benefits of working with a coach, or at least a coach like me. I don't know if all career coaches are like me, but I'm not going to let you make a massive life decision until we have really talked through all of the implications of that. And that's a lot of what realistic reality is going to do. So we went through those 4 top reasons. And so I want you to think through, did any of those really stick with you? Was there something that made you go, yes, that's it? And it could be more than one. That's the thing. Those were different options, but it could be a combination of those that really, just hit home with you. And so really think about, what are some of the patterns going on in your life right now, specifically around your career? So do you have stress? Do you have frustration? Do you have disengagement? Right? Because it's not always going to manifest that way. But if you have that, where is it coming from? Right? Is it stemming from the work that you're doing? Is it stemming from a person? Right? Is there a relationship? Is the culture impacting you negatively in some way? And then I want you to think, are there some big changes that have happened? So we want to think about changes at work. Did you switch managers, get a new teammate? Is there new higher level leadership and you just don't jive with them well? Is there something going on in life? We talk a lot, you'll hear me talk a lot this season about, are you a caregiver? That could mean a lot of things. It could be you're a parent. It could be you're looking after your parents. You could have a dog. I mean, it could be whatever it is, but did something change? I will tell you right now, as of this recording, our dog, she's very old and she's having more health problems. She went through a whole situation with seizures last year, and now we're in the middle of trying to figure out what's going on with her now. And she's old. So even though I'm here and I'm recording this and I'm, doing all the things internally, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of frustrations. And so you want to think about, how are some of those life things impacting what's going on right now? Because sometimes, and also, has somebody in your sphere gotten a new job and really likes it? Because this is one of those, the grass seems greener from the other side, and it's not always. And just because someone else left their situation, they're happier, doesn't mean the same is going to happen for you. So again, we want to dig into those reasons. We want to figure out exactly what is going on. So if something is bothering you, so let's say you get to kind of the depth of it, you're like, okay, I think it's this. Have we tried to do something? Have we had a conversation? Have we tried to fix it? Have we changed our habits? Have we taken some action to try to fix the thing that's bothering us? So just make sure that that's something that you are thinking through in realistic reality. To round out realistic reality, I want you to think about, is this something that just came on? Or is this something that you have been thinking about long term? So is this something that has been on your mind for a while? And I would say longer than a few months. So if you are in the 4 to 6 month mark of thinking about something, thinking about switching your job, for some of you, it could be years you've been thinking about this. We want to determine that, because that's going to give us more data to work with in terms of, was there a moment that changed why you wanted to leave? So for those of you who've been around for a while, I was in a situation where we had high level leadership change. And that was the beginning of the end for me in one of my positions because I did not agree. I agreed with some of what was going on, but I didn't agree with how some things were done. And so that was something that made me go, we do not share the same values of how to run a team. And so that started me actively looking for a new position. And I didn't leave right away. It was probably actually about a year before I ended up leaving because I just wasn't sure if that was the right answer. It was. It was. Um, so you want to think about how long have you been thinking through this and what was the catalyst for you starting to think about this? Let's go into stage 2, which is identity analysis. When we are talking about potentially switching jobs, identity analysis is going to be at the core of this discussion. Realistic reality is always going to be first because we want to figure out what exactly is triggering this. But going into identity analysis, this is going to be key because there's a lot that's happening in realistic reality that can impact what's going on in identity analysis. So first, we want to talk about values. You're going to hear me talk about values in probably every single episode this season because when we're talking about a disconnection, when we're talking about a frustration, values are usually going to be at the heart of it. So you need to figure out, are your values being met or have your values changed? So you want to have that conversation. You want to look at the work style. You want to look at what is going on in the team, in the management, and do you align with what's going on? Again, if you had a leadership change and your personalities do not mesh, then we need to have a different conversation, right? Um, and then do you even like the work anymore? Do you like the work that you're doing? Does it fulfill you? I know a lot of times we're switching jobs because the work doesn't fulfill us, but what does that mean? Does that mean that you're ready to move up into another position? Do you just need a change of environment? Like you like the work, but you just want to do something different? Or do you want to just burn it all down and start over again? So that's some of what you want to deal with when we're talking about personality and identity analysis, because we have to figure out where there's still alignment and where there is misalignment at the core of who we are. Are you working outside of your skill set? That is something that happens a lot, especially if you've been in an organization for a long time. You start to work on things that you don't really like to do, but you might be good at. And so that might be something to try to phase out of your position. The other thing that I want to mention too, when we're talking about identity, and this kind of mixes in with realistic reality as well, when we're talking about switching positions, you want to think about the core pieces of the career and in terms of what do you want and need. So what are your salary expectations? What kind of title are you looking for? What kind of function do you want to be in? What kind of industry do you want to be in? If you don't have answers for that, then we need to have a deeper conversation about exploring those pieces of yourself. I would say for most people, you really just need a switch or a change, or you need to change your mindset around your current position. Most people are not going to burn everything down and start over. For those of you that do, coaching, that's where coaching is really helpful because you want to make sure that you're making the right choices. You want to make sure that you are going into this, again, with clarity, with confidence, and being informed that this is going to be the right position for you. Okay. So now let's talk about goals. What is this going to look like from a goal perspective? So for some of you, it might be, my goal is to get another job. So if you're already clear on getting a new job, then that's going to be the goal. But for some of you, it might be something a little bit different. It might be that you need to research more. It might be that you do need to get a coach to talk it out. It might be that you want to have some conversations with leadership or with your manager. It might be that you need to do a audit of your schedule to really understand what's going on if you couldn't answer some of those questions before. So your goals can be as big or as targeted as you want them to be. Just make sure that whatever goals you choose, that they are realistic to the situation that you're in. Okay. So even if you say, I know that I want a new job, I know that there's nothing left for me here and I need to go forward with that. Okay, that's going to be your big goal. Then we need to outline what are the steps that you need to take to get there. And one of the things that I will say is a lot of you will jump into, I need a resume, I need to update my LinkedIn, I need to start looking for jobs and da 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 da. That's not where I would start. I would start with some of those questions that I asked earlier. What are your salary expectations? What are the titles that you are looking for? What is the industry that you want to be in? Do you want to be remote? Do you want to go into the office? Like, look at kind of the values and the things that you need in your career preferences, and outline those first, and then go into the resume, then go into the LinkedIn and all of that. But if you don't have that foundation, it's going to be really hard to update that information and then start looking for positions that are going to be the right fit. Because again, you don't want to end up in the same situation. And a lot of you will default to moving laterally instead of moving up or finding a lateral position that has different things for you to do. So you really want to make sure that you are thinking about that. Okay, so then we get into initiate action. So we've set some goals, we have an idea of what we're doing. And I'm keeping goals really vague because it's going to be unique for every person, but just remember to make them manageable for the situation that you are in. And honestly, one goal, that's exactly what we're looking for. You don't need to have 5. Okay. So from there, we're going to go into initiate action. So what does that mean? I outlined a couple of goals that you could do. So then what is the action that you're going to take to get you to that next step? I would wager that for most of you, it's either a conversation or research. And so that conversation is likely going to happen with a manager to try to figure out what is going on. Maybe that conversation is with a significant other to figure out, is this a good time for a career change? Maybe what does, your significant other want or need, or what do they see in you? The people closest to us see more than we think that they do. So bringing them into that conversation is also really helpful. And then research. I think that's a lot of times the big action that I like people to take is see what's out there. Sometimes, again, we think, oh, the grass is greener on the other side, but then you start looking at positions and you start looking at salaries. And then all of the sudden, oh, well, nothing is as flexible as the position that I have here. So now how can I work within this position, right? And again, this is where career coaching is really helpful, because a career coach like me can do career management coaching with you, which is, how do I function in this position? What are the things that I can do so that I don't feel like something is missing? So ultimately, taking action is taking those goals and creating those action steps that you are going to do. And again, make sure that they are manageable for the situation that you are in. All right. And finally, we're wrapping it up with stage 5, which is high impact habits. Now, there's not always going to be habits associated. And honestly, I'd rather you focus on the goals and actions and those first 4 steps before you get into stage 5, which is habits. The main habit that I would like you to really adopt if you are in this process is checking in with yourself. And so doing a weekly, at the very minimum, check-in. So set aside about 30 minutes onto your calendar every week for the foreseeable future, where you check in with yourself around what we've talked about here. And so this is targeted time where you're thinking about, I think I want another job. What does that look like? What are my goals? What are my actions? What did I do? What didn't I do? What were my barriers? So doing a little audit of yourself for the week. And this is a habit that will help you continue to move forward. And again, really figure out if you have barriers to any of this, you have to figure out what those barriers are and figure out where do you need additional support in order to move forward so that you can make these decisions, so that you can make the changes that you want and need in your career. All right. Man, if you have been questioning whether it's time to leave your job, I hope that today gave you the clarity and the structure to at least start to sort through it. I know for some of you, it's going to be a little bit deeper and it's going to take a little bit more time, but we're just scratching the surface with this conversation in this episode. So just to remember, we talked about 4 of the common reasons that people decide to move on. You're outgrowing your role. There's a misalignment in leadership or culture. There's an emotional toll that work is taking on you, and you might be staying for the wrong reasons. And one thing I want to really impress upon you is that you haven't done anything wrong. And I know my high achievers are going to blame themselves, and I really don't want you to do that. The fact that you are recognizing that something is not working and you're listening to this episode and then you're actually willing to do something about it, that's amazing. This is how we become more aligned with ourselves, and it's how we can make really confident decisions in our career. And one thing I want you to remember is you do not have to figure it out today. Again, we went through a lot of information here, and I threw a lot of scenarios and prompts at you that you're really going to have to sit through and digest. But that's why I created the Control Your Career process, to guide you through some of these pieces of your career to think about. This process is here to help you break this cycle of overthinking and reacting on impulse. I want you to be able to move forward with intention in your career. All right, so if you want to walk through this process using, if you want to walk through this challenge using the Control Your Career process, I actually linked a PDF into the blog post that's going to help you map it out. So this is where you can take what I've talked about in the episode and you have a place that you can actually start to outline it for yourself. So whether it's this topic or something else that you've been struggling with, this is the framework that I designed to help you meet you where you are at. All right. So if this episode resonated with you, please subscribe so that you don't miss what is coming next. Please share this episode with somebody that you know has been questioning their job or, been really torn about leaving. I think this will help kickstart at least some conversations for them. And again, check in with those free resources in the blog post. I don't want you to miss out. And I want you to be on my email list. So when you download those resources, it automatically puts you on my email list so that you can hear more about new episodes that come out, as well as what is going on with the book that I'm writing. So you'll be the first to get those updates. Thanks again for being here. And until next time, keep taking control of your career.